3D level design forces you to think in all three dimensions and has its own unique challenges. If you want to learn the basics of mapping a great level in 3D, keep watching because class is in session. Hello everyone, I'm Steel.
And I'm Teal.
And we're with Studio Blue.
Thank you for joining us for our Creator Classroom series, where we teach theory and best practices for game designers as well as writers.
Hello Valborn, hello RPG Emma, anyone watching. Remember, if you're watching us live, please give us a follow and consider subscribing. And if you're catching us VOD on YouTube, please smack that like button, click subscribe, ring the notification bell with tender loving care. What is our topic tonight, Teal?
Tonight's topic is basics of 3D level design, and this particular module is aimed at game developers.
Right. So if you're a writer, this is definitely more on the game developer track. However, you might learn something because visual narrative is what level design is all about. Quick little side note. This may seem very similar to the 2D level design we did 2 weeks ago, and that's because level design is level design regardless of the dimensions of your medium.
Right.
So if this sounds, especially some portions sound very similar to it is.
They are, yeah.
I will be giving the main lecture here because I'm at the control booth, but Tia will be adding in her knowledge because she is a level design expert. So.
Right.
We're gonna make one quick announcement before we jump in, and I will be announcing this 2 or 3 times over the course of the entire workshop. Next week, next Monday, is our final Creator Classroom of 2020. Instead of skipping a week, we're gonna do it next week, and please get this out to as many people as you can. We're gonna go over the most important thing in game development.
Yes.
The GDD. Our final Creator Classroom will be on the game design document, the game Bible.
Yep, that's the game Bible.
Yes, very important. So hey, Berkeleyos, hey, Graceless, welcome to the stream. Yes, landscaping is hard.
Yes, landscaping can be very hard.
Use meshes to hide your mistakes. Okay. So let's just jump right on in.
Jump on in.
So the purpose of this presentation is we're going to go over the theory of 3D level design, which you will see is very similar to 2D. Just a different paradigm,
right?
But the best practices are the same. We're going to discuss things that you want to consider when working in a 3D environment as opposed to a 2D environment. We're going to walk through some steps in designing your 3D level, and we'll review points like triggers and zones like we did last time, because triggers and zones, aka the logic of your level, is where all the magic happens.
Yes, it is. And
then we'll show a live example in the Unreal Engine with me that you guys, our Patreons and Twitch subscribers, voted on. As usual, if you have any questions, just throw them out over chat. Both Teal and I are monitoring.
Yes.
And we'll be glad to answer them.
Yeah, this is an open discussion. So if you have any questions, comments, throw them up in chat.
Yeah, hit us up. If you've actually worked in 3D, especially if you've worked for any length of time, this is a basics class and a theory class.
Yes.
So we're going to go over more of what goes behind it than how to do it in certain engines.
Yeah, this is not going to be how to do this.
Right.
Because there's plenty of tutorials out there on
tons. All right, so let's just jump into the presentation.
Okay.
So what is 3D level? Yes, absolutely, Burke. The GDD. Tell everybody.
Yes. You're going to need to know that.
This is the big one. Okay, so what is 3D level design? At its basics, 3D level design is no different than 2D level design, except you're adding in that extra axis.
Yes.
So you, instead of just having length and width, you have length, width, and depth. So you're designing an area using all 3 of the axes. What makes 3D level design its own thing is you're unconstrained by those spatial dimensions that you have in 2D level design. So if you're working on a 2D map, whether it be in a game engine or on a piece of paper, like, graphing for Dungeons and Dragons, whatnot, you're constrained by 2 axes. And that spatial constriction forces you to work within a certain paradigm.
Yeah.
once you add in that third dimension, you're not constrained by anything other than what the engine can do and what you as the designer can do. So that is important to know, that 3D level design is a thing, because like the real world around you, you can mimic it and even go far beyond that.
Right.
You move along the axes and etc. So the thing that I want to make sure you understand is that when we say 3D levels, we're not talking about 3D presented as 2D, like a 3D engine level, like a Mario level.
Yeah.
That's constricted on the X and Y axis, but is made of 3D objects. That's still 2D level design, using a 3D engine to create that background parallax scrolling effect.
Right.
Not the same thing. Not the same thing. So this is an actual 3D design where the level goes X, Y, Z, and the player can move wherever you allow them to. So why learn 3D level design? Because, you know, a lot of people in our community come from RPG Maker, where it is heavily 2D. So why learn 3D as well? Well, first off, let's just address the white elephant in the room. It is the mainstay in modern game development. That doesn't mean that 2D doesn't have its place. In fact, 2D is making a comeback with games
it is.
like Bloodstained, and, you know, I mean, of course, the RPG Maker engine. But there are games out there that are amazing in 2D only.
Yes, they are.
But let's just address it again. Most AAA games, most games out there are in a 3D environment.
Right.
And Emma wants to learn 3D, so woohoo!
Yeah, absolutely.
It is our recommendation, both Teal and ours, that every game developer out there learn both 2D and 3D level design. Learn to do both, and that way you can switch between them depending on what the needs are for your project. It is less limited than 2D levels. I mean, it is far less limited. We are not bashing 2D levels. We're just saying 3D gives you a lot more freedom. And with that kind of comes a bit of a caveat. Because
all of a sudden you have everything opened up. And with all sorts of possibilities, it gets overwhelming.
Exactly.
It can be intimidating.
It really can be. When you're doing a 2D level, I reached out to like gesture a bit because I like to use my hands when I talk, and I just tap Teal on the hand. So when you're doing a level in 2D, you're forced to think outside of the box.
Yeah.
And it's you got to innovate. When you're making 3D, you don't have to innovate, but as Teal said, suddenly you have all the options. So, you know, both skill sets are very important. Berkeley says, Bloodstained is more like Parallax. Well, it's still a 2D game. It's a 2D constriction with 3D assets, which is what we talked about. It's more relatable to the player, by the way, because we are beings in a 3-dimensional universe.
Yeah.
Quantum physics and 4 and 5 and 10 dimensions aside, we exist in a 3D reality. When we walk down the hall, we don't get smaller, we just go down the hall.
Correct.
So we can relate really well to a 3D environment. And the thing also, and this is the big one, it forces you, the developer, to think in 3 dimensions. And you would not think that that's a problem, but it actually is. Most people don't think in 3 dimensions. They actually think in 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
And I mean, a great example of that is the climactic fight in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. They beat Khan because Khan thinks in 2 dimensions and not 3 dimensions. And, you know, everyone has a big laugh over that, but that's a reality.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you have people like who think, you know, the Earth is flat and stationary, because they're thinking in 2-dimensional facet and not a 3-dimensional facet. So working in 3D level design forces you to think 3-dimensionally, and that actually can help you understand the space you live in.
Yes.
But there's a lot of bonuses to working in 3D.
Because what way I'm thinking it, because I'm a 3D level designer, is I have my objects and I'm rotating them along the X, Y, and Z axis. I'm placing them at the height that I want them, and I'm actually rotating them in real space.
Right. So Teal has to take into account how a person in 3D would look at it, as opposed to just popping it onto a map. So here's some things to consider, and this is really important when you're designing a level. This isn't going to help you in architecture or outside of a 3D engine, because reality is much more powerful than any program could ever be. but you want to really pay attention to what's going to focus the attention of the player.
Right.
Because what the player is focusing on, you as the 3D level designer have to draw an arrow to it. I don't mean a literal arrow, but you have to make sure the player can see it. So if the player has to go down a road that leads them to a mountain, and you have it so well hidden by your clever level designing that they never find it, you just confused your player. Also, if you want the player to see the giant starship as it drops out of hyperspace, you better make sure that they have an unobstructed view of it at that point.
Right.
So when you're designing in 3D, you have to think about what the player is capable of seeing at that moment, and how you can draw their focus, their attention to it.
Yeah.
The second is also just as important, because this, as Berkelios made a joke earlier, this allows you to, well, cheat a little. What can the player not see? Because whatever the player can't see doesn't exist to them. It's the same concept of film.
Right.
If it's not in frame, it doesn't exist. Think of players, this is going to sound silly, I'm not insulting anyone, but think of players as, 6-month-old babies. If it's not directly in front of them, it doesn't exist. And that's how film works, and that's how game engines work.
That's how it works.
If it's not in front of you, it's not there at that moment. And as soon as it comes into focus, as soon as the player's looking at it, it exists.
Burke, basically think like Michael Bay and do the opposite.
Very, very true. So when you're designing your levels, you want to take into account what the player will never see. And if the player will never see something like what's behind a rock or behind a piece of landscape, you can have all kinds of BS in there.
Yep.
A common mistake of beginning 3D level designers is to try to have every tree, rock, and piece aligned perfectly. And that is it's never going to work. You don't do that. It's okay to put that tree halfway in a hill. It's okay to have that rock jutting out of a piece of bark, at the trunk of a tree. As long as the player can never see it.
Yeah.
Use whatever it takes to present this 3D canvas in a way that works aesthetically and makes it easier on you. Because I guarantee you, no one has time to make a perfect level where everything is the way it would be represented in reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to point out that if you go into the console, if you're playing the PC version of Skyrim, if you go into the console and turn off toggle, you can move, between the layers, right?
Yeah.
If you have Skyrim, do that. Take a look at how those maps are built and layered. There's a whole lot of stuff that you don't see, and they just kind of pile it on. It's not pretty.
No.
But it's there, and it works. It helps the designer of that level to build their level. You'll see a bunch of tree trunks and rocks and shit that's down there in the sub-level.
Yep, you will.
But they put it there because they're building a layer of landscaping. Exactly.
So think of it like that as you design your 3D level in whatever engine you're using, or your 3D piece in Blender or Maya or 3ds Max.
Right.
If the player viewer can't see it, you can do whatever you want there. That is your backstage.
Yes, it is.
To work with whatever you want. One of the things that I used to do back in the day, and I don't do it quite as much now because there's other ways to handle things appearing awesomely, is I would have something right below the terrain. Back when I worked in Unreal Engine 2.5 doing the America's Army stuff, if I needed to have like an insurgent or an enemy or something just out of view, and it's not there when the player's looking at it, then focuses attention, attention shifted to the left, and then it shifted back and the enemy's there. You could put like the pawn in a hidden area, or the barrel or whatever in a hidden area, and then just pop it into view by just literally raising it up. And the player would never know because they weren't focusing and seeing when that thing came out of the ground.
Right.
So
I see that. Yeah.
Burke says there's a lot of tricks in Skyrim's creation engine, like a level for just corpses or just big bookshelves, putting them below the ground as tables. Yeah.
All kinds of tricks.
All kinds of tricks. And it's kind of also funny because on a logistical level, it works like that. The chests that merchants have, the merchant chests in Skyrim, that contains their inventory, is hidden underneath the level. You the player can't get to it.
No, you can't.
But it's there. The last piece that I want you all to consider when working in a 3D environment before you actually design your level is that smaller is always better than larger.
Yes.
We said this. We said the same thing in 2D.
Yeah.
And it holds the case in 3D. You want to make your level smaller, more compact, and more detailed than larger. There's a reason why games like GTA 5 are just so massively expensive and difficult to make, because they pump the scale really high. Cyberpunk 2077, which Teal and I have been playing, has the same problem.
It does.
You know, you start after a while having a lot of locked doors.
Yeah.
Locked doors. And it starts making the world feel a little bit of, it's a little fake.
Yeah, it's fake, it's restrictive.
Right.
You're like, okay, so you start feeling like, well, every door is locked. Every
right.
Or worse yet, these doors are just painted on.
Right. Exactly. Now we understand it's an open world.
Of course.
So we say that with the caveat that open worlds follow a slightly different paradigm of design, but it still doesn't have to be that way. So when you are designing your levels, when you're designing it, whether it be something the size of a valley, an entire castle, or just a room in a dungeon, think smaller is better. Always.
Because good Lord, you have, in 3D, you have unlimited scale.
Yeah.
Oh boy, you don't want to make an area that's so big that the player gets lost.
Yeah. And always consider making a large map into smaller maps joined together. Just things to consider.
Yeah.
CPU usage is a thing.
Oh, it does. It is.
All right, so moving on. These are the first steps to the 3D level design, and this is almost identical to what we said in the 2D workshop. First thing, write out your level in either a list or paragraph form. So take what you want your level to accomplish from the beginning, where the player enters it, whether it be a room that they have to search, or a dungeon they have to traverse, or a castle where they have to get to the king, or a spaceship where they have to get to the bridge in order to pilot it. Whatever it is. Write it out in paragraph bullet format. Just boom, one after another. Player enters, player wakes up from cryosleep. Player goes down the hallway. Player stops in the weapons room and arms themselves. Player gets the gravity gun. Player gets the portal gun. Player moves across engineering. Player takes the elevator. Player reaches the bridge. Player vaporizes Captain Glottis. Player takes over. And lots of cake.
Yeah.
Write it down. And when we get to our GDD creator classroom, which will be next Monday, so that's my second time saying it. Next Monday, we'll be doing our creator classroom on the game design document. You'll see that a lot of times these little level design lists, level design documents, fill up and add it. And you have these lists, so you can always refer back to what your original intention was and whether you have to modify it, which you can. Because all GDDs and LDDs, all design documents, are living documents. Or if you need to revamp your actual design in the engine because it's deviated too far from your original vision.
Right.
That was the long version. The short version I can quote from Amadeus. Write it down, Mozart. It does no one any good in your head.
That's a good quote. Yeah.
Next is to sketch it. Sketch that sucker out. Write a map. Take grid paper preferred. And use height notes. Unlike in 2D level design, you definitely have to say, is this an elevated level here?
Oh, yes.
So the platform's moving. Is this terrain that I have to worry about? Is this up on a cliff or a bluff? So write down those notes so that you're not looking later at what the hell is this squiggly line. Oh, that's a river. What's this over here? Oh, that's a bluff that has a fortress on it. I got this. And then finally, draw out your critical path and optional paths, which we will define in a little bit. That doesn't change regardless of the dimensions of your engine. Always draw out your critical path. You have to know the path the player has to take to get through whatever your map is in order to complete whatever objective you've given them. And this is regardless of if it's an open world game or a highly linear game, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The player has to take a way to get to whatever it is you want to get them to. I guess literally a sandbox would be the only exception, but even then, those are goals, so draw out that critical path. Save yourself and your player a lot of trouble. And do the same with your optional paths. What is the rewards they get?
Right.
So let's do some definitions here.
Okay.
Okay, so the most important one, and the one that Teal and I talk about literally all the time, whether it be a critical play, a creator classroom, critiquing someone's game, it doesn't matter. The critical path is the path the player has to take in order to complete the objectives of your level, to get from the start to the end.
Right.
It could be something as straightforward as moving right across the screen until you get to a flag above a castle. Hey, Mario.
Yeah.
Or it could be unbelievably complex, require a lot of backtracking and back and forth, like in Bloodborne or Dark Souls. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Every level it has a critical path.
Yeah.
And you as the designer have to map that out, and you have to know it. And you have to know how the player can deviate from it. Critical paths can have branches. When a player reaches a fork in the road and both the left and the right lead them to their destination, that's a critical path with a fork. You need to know what happens if they go left, what happens if they go right. Critical path. Please master that. Then there's the optional paths. Paths, not path, path. Optional paths are places the player can go that don't lead them to the destination but give some other reward. It could be a tangible reward, like, an item, loot, a fat loot.
Right.
It could be a piece of lore. It could be a rewarding conversation. It could be a beautiful view. As long as this optional path leads them to something that makes it worth their while that they took that path.
Right.
We can't stress enough how much it annoys Teal and I when a level has a dead end that does nothing.
Oh, that's like the kiss of death right there. If you're going to have a path, there needs to be a reward for taking that path.
Right, regardless of what it is.
Regardless of what the reward is, there needs to be some kind of reward for the player taking that path rather than some other path.
And like we said, it can be a view. It could be like they get this gorgeous view. Mm-hmm. It could be they see something that's environmental storytelling, like they find a camp with a skeleton and a half-written note that just says, I messed up. I mean, something.
Right.
Anything.
Right.
They don't even have to be able to read the note. Just seeing the skeleton and the note in their hand is enough. Something to say, hey, there was a good reason to come. Mm-hmm. Okay, then we're going to talk about checkpoints. Checkpoints are the milestones or waypoints along the critical path that do certain things. It could be like a conversation, a cutscene between an NPC and the player. It could be a quest giver. It could be a goal in that quest. It could be a mandatory treasure they have to have in order to continue the level. It's just it is subjective, a checkpoint, but it is anything that momentarily stops them long enough to go, okay, here was something I needed to continue my journey.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be something that stops the action, because you could have them just walking and talking, like one of those active conversations in some of the JRPGs we play.
Right.
But it's still a checkpoint. And yes, as Chaos says, checkpoints are lifesavers because they can literally be an autosave.
And I was going to point that out, that checkpoints can be as simple as walking through a door. Mm-hmm. And once you walk through the door, the game notes that.
Yeah.
So if you die, you spawn back at that door rather than at the start of that level.
Exactly. Open world games use those a lot. They really do.
Yes, they do.
Your GTAs, your Saints Rows, your Cyberpunks. Mm-hmm. You go into a new room and the objective updates and the game saves in case you die.
Right.
Pardon me. And then finally the destination. The destination is the end of the level. That doesn't mean the level ends. That doesn't mean they transition to a new level. Mm-hmm. It could be anything from a boss fight to, if you're going through a town, the person you have to meet in order to continue the story. Mm-hmm. It could be legitimately anything.
Anything.
But it's where they are going to in order to advance whatever your game is in that level. That's your destination. Maps and levels can have multiple starts and multiple destinations and multiple checkpoints along the way. Don't think that just because you design a town, it can only have one start and one finish. That's not how level design works. But whenever you are designing what that level is going to do, you have to know where you're starting and where you're ending up. Multiple, and all the variations thereof.
Right. So all this ties into your ability as a developer to plan.
Yes.
Plan. Before you ever pick up that pin before you ever log into your engine.
Yep.
You need to have a plan.
You really do.
So that's what these are.
Yeah, exactly. And like Chaos said, it's a goal to get to. And to kind of reiterate one more time what Teal said. The more you plan, the less disasters and problems you're going to come up to. So let's continue.
Okay.
So what are the next steps? Okay, so to kind of just, these is very similar to 2D level design because this is level design in a nutshell. Pick a color palette. So we have a creator classroom that we did on color theory.
Right.
And it goes really deep. Teal goes super depth into how color theory works. I highly recommend you watch it. You can also watch the one on visual themes as well. So pick that because, you know, maybe you need a purple. Maybe you need to go with adjacent or square color. You know,
right.
I'm using words that are only going to make sense if you know what color theory is, but you've got to pick your palette to work from. And this is really important in engines that want to go for a realistic look, stylized look. Actually, let me just say, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're creating a visual look. Even if your game is monochromatic.
Even if it's monochromatic, you're still picking a color palette. Yeah.
I like what Berkeley has just said. Destination, your map's purpose was fulfilled. Chekhov School of Game Design.
Thank you.
So true. So true. So once you've picked your color palette, grab some try that again. Gather some placeholder graphics and textures. It's a little different than 2D because instead of sprites, you're grabbing textures, models, meshes, a lot of stuff. But you can grab the placeholder stuff.
Right.
Heck, if you're working in an engine like Unreal or Unity, they come with a ton of free assets. Use those for now.
Use those free assets to put your placeholders down.
The reason being is that if you try to create your level in its finalized state, you're never going to finish the level, or it's going to come off really bad for one of two reasons. It's either going to come off badly because you put so much effort into it psychologically, you don't want to change it for it to work. That's bad.
Yep.
Or you're going to get so frustrated, you're just going to start throwing things together and you're going to end up with a hot steaming mess. So trust us, from years of experience, we can tell you placeholder graphics are your best friend.
Yeah.
Then you want to design the level in the engine's editor. At a certain point, we talk about planning. Proper player planning prevents poor performance. But let me tell you, at a certain point, you got to stop planning. You got to open up your engine
and then start making it.
Yeah. Because you're never going to know how you have to tweak your level to fit your vision or change your vision to fit your level until you start making it. Once you have a working level, alpha test it. Just get in there and try to break it. Try to make sure it works. Make sure those features you put in there, those magic systems you've been talking about for months and months. I mean, the different pieces, parts of your level, the scripts, all that stuff. Yeah, Infinity Blade, good enough for testing. Exactly what Burke said. If you use the Unreal Engine, download all the Infinity Blade assets, use that. That is more than good enough to test your level.
Right. And, you know, as far as what is in the alpha test, well, the basics is, can the player move around your map within the intended way?
Yeah.
2, do all of your scripts and code work.
Your features, right. Right. When they go to a door, does the door open or does the door hit them in the face?
Exactly.
You know, when they open up a treasure chest, does the treasure chest open the correct way?
Yeah.
Does it give them the loot that you want them to give it? Test your logic.
All of it.
Test it. It doesn't have to look pretty. It doesn't even have to function animated. The animations don't even have to function. You can walk up to a treasure chest and instead of it opening, you have gotten a potion.
Right.
It just on a logic level, as if you were talking a choose your own adventure book. It has to function. And then finally start replacing your placeholder graphics with actual assets. And you're going to do a lot more beyond that. But once you know you have a functioning level, start replacing those placeholder pieces with what you actually are going to have. Because you may notice that the placeholder tree has a wider hitbox or a narrower hitbox.
Yes. That's
the collision detection than the one you're actually going to use. So you may have to adjust some. You may notice that the animation you have for your particular player character moving through makes them fall off the platform when they start walking again, or when they crouch, because the way their feet spread out. You may be changing things from the placeholder to the actual, but that's okay because the basics of the level work. So once you've done all that, we want to kind of move on beyond that to the final steps. Now, when we say final steps, we're not talking about like quick stuff.
No.
There's so much that's going to go into this. You have started when you start changing those placeholder graphics over to the real graphics. You have at that point started to make your level look like your vision. Now you're going to do everything else. And this is not necessarily an order. This is just what we recommend to do. We recommend adding triggers and zones and other pieces of logic. So your as Teal was saying, your basic scripts already work. Your treasure chests work, your doors open, etc. Now you want to add zones and triggers, things like, hey, when I walk over this area here, a conversation occurs. When I enter this area here, the boss jumps off the cliff and attacks me.
Right.
Those are your triggers and your zones, which we will define shortly. These steps right here, these final steps, Chaos, you absolutely can do them out of order. Some people want to do lighting as soon as possible, and we're good with that. Some people want to do particle effects first because it helps them imagine what their level looks like when they see the pretty sparklies or the fire. All that's acceptable. You're never constrained to one thing. We just recommend doing these steps after you have a functioning map.
Correct.
Test your logic and gameplay. Please make sure your game plays well. Make sure your level functions. Then you start adding aesthetics. Lighting is the most important thing. In a 3D engine, lighting will make or break your game.
Yes, it's all about the lighting.
It's not a question. If you have the capital, go to Udemy and get a lighting course in whatever engine you're going to use.
Yes.
Whether it be Unity, Unreal, Godot, it doesn't matter. Usually they go on sale for like $20. You know, maybe even we'll make one day. You've got to learn lighting in 3D. It is the most important thing. In Steele's opinion, it's the most important thing to learn. Shaders and particle effects, very important. Shaders are more than just textures. People always get too confused. Textures are the visible surface of your object.
That's right.
Shaders are the things that add on to it to make like wet stone look wet, charred stone look charred, bump maps that actually make bricks look like bricks and not just flat. Those are all various pieces of shit. Water is a shader.
Yes, water is a shader.
And I can't even begin to tell you how hard water is to do without plugins that you buy from the marketplace. That's all shaders.
Yeah.
Do them. Particle effects, that's fire. Fire's a particle effect.
Yeah.
Light beams are a particle effect. Light dust particles.
Yeah, dust particles, fireflies.
Those are particle effects.
Those are all particle effects.
Yeah, rain's a particle effect. Consider that some engines rework lighting fast. Also, collision is too important. Yeah, post-processing, right. Collision's very important as well. That kind of goes into the previous parts of having the level actually work, like the different placeholder graphics. My brain blanked out for a second. Thanks, Burke. Like the placeholder graphics, making sure the trees with their hitboxes, which is collision, are not too big, not too small. So yes, collision's very important as well. If you use the invisible wall, make sure the invisible wall has real life objects that are in the same area so that you're not hitting an invisible wall, but you're hitting a bunch of trees and rocks that the player goes, oh, I can't go past that. You know, it all has to match up together. And you'll see that when we get to our sample level in a little while. Animation for the modules, for the models. Add those.
Animations, right.
I can't tell you how important a swaying tree is. Swaying tree is so important. A swaying tree, grass that moves, so important. If you can't do it yourself, get someone to do it for you. Yeah. Glip can be used for some effects. I think you mean GIMP.
Yeah, GIMP.
I think that's what Cass meant. But yeah, all animation. It's not just about your character walking. Animate ripples in the water.
Yes.
Animate dust or footprints, just little things.
All those small things that make a world look real and alive.
Exactly. Then start adding in your sounds. As important as lighting, and according to Burke, collision, which I agree, sound, super important. A world with a level with no sound is a level that's not alive. Now, for the sake of what we're going to do later, you're not going to have any sounds there except for the ambient sound I put in there. simply because I didn't want to distract from teaching you guys. But if you approach a fire, you better hear fire.
You better hear the crackle of the fire burning, the pop of the wood. You better hear all that.
If you hear thunder in the background, a lightning bolt, you better hear that crack of thunder.
Yes.
If you step on a wooden plank that is loose, you better hear. Basically, when you're designing your level, look at everything that could potentially make a sound and say, what would that sound be in real life? And then put it there.
Put it in.
And then background music. Cannot overstate how important background music is, unless you're going for the aesthetic of no background music at all. Some games do that wonderfully. However, you have to be really good at using sounds, ambient, proximity, etc.
Yeah.
You have to be really good at all that in order to say my level is alive enough orally, that means sound, to not need background music. So that's your call as a designer. I always recommend having background music.
I do too. It's just it just as a default.
Yeah. My playing of Skyrim VR right now, I have the music turned off because the number of mods I have that add sounds everywhere, the world sounds so alive that the music actually detracts from it. But every other game I have, Cyberpunk, Half-Life Alyx, it doesn't matter what game it is, VR or not, I have the music playing because only that one game is able to do it right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, timing, very important. All right, so let's move on. You want to be able to also modify your assets, whether your assets are something that you made or something that someone else made. You need to be able to change the attributes. The attributes would be, you need to get used to it. That would be changing things like the physics, the collision, whether the engine's going to render it normally or if you have to turn that on, whether the player can step on it and ride it, whether it itself moves. A moving platform that doesn't actually move is not a moving platform. You have to be able to get into the engine and know what attributes you have to change
in order to make it moving.
Yeah, exactly. Emma said you can make the music very soft. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can have it be just enough that you can just hear something, but it's not overpowering.
But if you do that, you're going to have to restrict the player's ability to change the volume of your BGM.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're going for that certain sound and you want it to be soft, somebody turning it louder will ruin the effect you're trying to go for.
In classical,
so you're going to have to think about that.
In classical music, it's called piano, which is the same thing as the instrument, but piano means soft, as opposed to forte,
which is loud.
So if you have a background music, if you have a BGM that is piano, and I don't mean just a piano instrument, it could be anything, then you want to, like Phil said, restrict their ability to change it, because sometimes you can bring that note up just a little bit and it brings their attention to it. So let's say you have a flute and a harp playing, and it's very light and very quiet, but then you want to suddenly just give an impact to the player. You can ramp it up forte and then bring it right back down, and that just alerted the player. If you can ever use your music in your game as a oral tool to tell your story, you have mastered music in your game.
Yeah.
It's difficult to do well beyond the scope of this classroom, but can be done. We've seen it done. Unfinished Swan did a good job of using music. Okay, so changing materials. Learn how to do that in whatever engine you're in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That way you have a marble pillar that is a gray marble, and you can turn it into a white marble.
Or you can turn it into stucco.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get rid of the marble and turn it into stucco instead. Right,
because what most people don't realize when they first start 3D is, unless the engine is utter garbage, you can take whatever material you want and put it on whatever mesh you want. And material is a combination of texture and shader. So let's say you have a wet marble, but you don't want wet marble, you want dry. You go into your editor, you change that shader so that it's a drier marble look, and then pop it and put it onto that particular mesh you want to change.
Oh yeah.
These are two things you need to do. You also need to consider creating your own. Being a 3D level designer goes hand in hand with being a 3D artist.
Yes, it does.
You do not have to, but it makes your job as a developer so much easier if you can either take a base asset that you purchased or someone made for you and modify it, or if you can make your own, just make your own because it's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So these are all things to consider on the modification side, which you need to be able to do. Now we're going to talk a bit about positive and negative space. This is exactly how it was in the 2D lecture. I'm going to pass it over to Teal for a second because she's the master of this. The definitions are right there on the screen, but right. Teal always talks about positive and negative space.
I do. And it's so very important in the visual balance of your levels. Positive space is the actual objects that are in your space. We say it's the focus on a direct subject. It's a ball, it's a chair, and it's how the ball and the chair are in position with each other. That's positive space. Now, the negative space,
One second. Hey, Zimc. So apparently we're trying to get rated by, I'm guessing, Hawk. Yeah, Hawk's trying to rate us, but it's Dwork. So hello, everyone from Hawk Zombie Stream. Steel and Teal is teaching 3D level design tonight. We will be, next Monday, we'll be doing our final creator classroom of the year, which will be on the game design document. So tell everybody, if you want to learn how a GDD works and why it's so important, be here next Monday. Teal, please continue.
Okay. So a negative space, we define that as the area around the subject. That's all the empty space that the objects aren't actually filling.
So if you have a chair and a table, the chair and the table are your positive space, and the place between the two. And
all that empty space around them, that's the negative space.
Got it.
And the goal is balance. You must achieve a visual balance between these two. Yeah. Between the positive space of all your assets and the negative space,
which is between them and around them. So I have a question for you, Teal. If you have too much positive space in a 3D environment, what does that do? What is the consequence?
The consequence is twofold. One, you're restricting player movement. Okay, you can't easily get around all this stuff. And two, you've just overloaded your CPU.
So it creates unnecessary clutter that could stop the player or actually crash the program.
It sure could.
Well, it's like the 1,000 watermelons in Whiterun.
Yes, or the 9,000 woodpeckers.
The 9,000 woodpeckers. Yeah, and it looks cluttered and confusing.
Absolutely. It looks cluttered, confusing, amateurish, and just bad.
So what happens if you have too much negative space?
If you have too much negative space, it looks empty, and your room, your area looks empty. It looks unfinished, and unfinished equals unprofessional, boring, and visually unpleasing.
A good example of how to use a room with very little, but if I may, Teal, but is not nothing but negative space, is that 3D game, A Chair in the Room we play in VR.
Oh, that's true.
Because in that one, especially the Missing Girl short story chapter, it's just in one empty room, but it has a few things here, a few things there, just enough to give the player a look. But then it also puts things like the floorboards in the center area look kind of creaky and old, and there's a light coming in with particle effects. So even though there's nothing physical in that middle of that room, they break up the negative space with the different 3D elements of like texture,
lighting, particle effects, ambient sound. Yes, they break up that empty space.
So in other words, please correct me if I'm wrong, you can break up negative space and balance it with positive space using a variety of techniques, not just throwing meshes at the problem until it goes away.
That's correct.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
And I apologize if that's what I seem to be saying.
No, you're good.
But I do focus on the visual a lot.
Right.
But let's not forget the oral as well, and and animation.
Yeah. Throwing a rug in the center of the room has saved more than one level we've looked at in RPG Maker. So you can do the same thing in Unreal or any other 3D engine. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. So 3D level components. So 2D levels have layers. 3D levels have components. These are not everything, and for whatever reason, events didn't go yellow, so woohoo, that looks weird. Okay, so first there's landscapes. Now this is a basic lecture, so we're not going to go deep into what everything is. Landscaping is, as Burke said in the beginning of the classroom, one of the hardest things to do. It is very hard to master landscaping and make it look realistic. But you need to, unless you're going to be nothing but indoors with no variation other than brick. You know, I mean, if you're going to have earth popping out of the side, okay, you can do that with a mesh. But if you're going to have a cavern, that's a landscape. If you're going to have a valley, a mountain, if you're going to have anything outside of a dungeon, that's landscaping. You want to learn how the landscaping tools of your engine work. You want to learn how to make it look organic and not like you just slapped a bunch of textures on a hill. Because good landscaping, your landscaping is one piece. And your landscaping, so that what you use to create your mountain is the same piece of landscape mesh that you use to create your rivers. Yes. You have to make it all look organic. And that is one of the hardest things a 3D developer can do. Then there's water volumes. That's any kind of water. Rivers, lakes, waterfalls. It doesn't matter. Streams, brooks, babbling bogs of eternal stench. Water volumes are anything liquid that moves through your level. It could be a sewer. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That's a different component than landscapes, but they often work together. Yeah, stick to the ones you've used to. Absolutely, MC, 100%. Skyboxes.
Oh, skybox. Yeah.
That is the sky as the player will see it. That can contain clouds, contain the sun, moons, galaxies, black holes. It doesn't matter.
Different stars, different constellations.
Exactly. So the skybox is this thing that wraps around your level that the player will never get to. The player will never be able to get up there, but from whatever reference point they're in, that looks like the sky. Then there's static meshes. Those are 3D models that don't animate. That doesn't mean they don't move.
Right.
It means they don't animate. They don't have movable components.
Right.
A moving platform in a 3D Mario game is a static mesh. The Koopa Troopa is not. Static meshes, you're going to have tons of them. And one of the tricks you can do, and this is well beyond the scope of this classroom, in order to cut down on CPU load is to use instances.
Yeah.
An instance of a static mesh is like a stamp where the CPU only renders in the original object and then creates a quote-unquote instance. There's really no other way to describe it other than a virtual copy that it can put anywhere. Instances have very little CPU load.
Correct.
So if you have a forest, as you guys will see soon enough, and you want to have hundreds of trees, if not thousands of trees in the background, use whatever tool creates instances of those trees instead of putting down 1,000 tree meshes.
Yeah.
Guarantee you, your level is going to choke and there's no CPU that can handle it.
Right.
Actors, and I'm using the Unreal term, but in general, an actor is a 3D model that's animated. There's various words for that. I'm using the Unreal terminology, but that is something that actually has a rig to it. A rigging, is the technique of adding a skeletal frame to a 3D object that allows it to move. If you have your orc from World of Warcraft and it's just standing there in the T-pose, that's when the arms are out.
Yeah.
It can't move until you add a skeleton to it and rig the mesh to that skeleton and make it animatable.
Right.
So that is, of course, beyond the scope of the classroom, but that is the quick and dirty of how 3D animation works. And when you import that into your engine, they're actors. They're not static meshes. Static means unmoving. So you could call it a dynamic mesh, you could call it an actor, doesn't matter.
Right.
Those you generally treat differently than static meshes. They're two different things because they follow their own logic or code or scripts.
Yeah, a static mesh is a wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
A static mesh is a wall.
But an actor is a door that opens and closes.
A treasure chest. Or an orc.
Yeah.
Or you.
So that's that, yeah.
Yep. Okay, then we have particle systems.
Ah, yes, the particle systems.
So whenever we talk about particle effects, we actually mean particle systems. So a particle system can be anything that is spawned by an emitter. In 3D development, an emitter is an invisible point in which instances of a particle, a single particle, are spawned. When you look at flames, it is a single set of particles that is spawned very rapidly to create a fire. When you look at bullets coming out of a gun, those are little bullet meshes that are created instanced out of the emitter that is on your gun's nozzle. Things like that. Lightning bolts, fireballs, raindrops.
Rain's a good one. Raindrop.
Yeah. There's no way any engine out there. Snow. There's no way any engine or computer out there could handle rendering rain or snow if it was each drop was its own mesh.
Yeah.
Not possible. So you create particle system that just sends those snowflakes or raindrops down instanced and creates this beautiful effect in your world. Magic light. Yeah.
Magic light's another one.
Yeah. Dust in light. Whenever you look at a room, you go into an abandoned room, like in an abandoned mansion.
Right.
And the sunlight's coming through and you see the dust inside.
Yeah.
The light, that's a particle system.
That is.
Then there's decals.
Decals.
The best way to describe a decal to someone who doesn't understand the technical side is it's the bullet holes in the walls after you shoot.
Yes.
That's a decal. It is literally a 2D effect. It could be a texture of its own or something else that is applied to the 2D surface of a 3D object.
Right.
So, again, when you fire your gun and it hits the wall and makes a bullet hole, that's a decal. Decals can spawn. They can vanish if there's too many of them. A great example is Fallout 4.
Yeah.
Fallout 4 allows about a dozen or so decals on the wall when you're shooting your machine gun, then it gets rid of the last one and adds the next one in. Yes. That's for CPU load. So you got to understand how decals work. It's good to have that knowledge. Most of the time, it's the scripting of the gun, the lightning bolt if it's a scorch mark, your footprints in the snow.
Oh, footprints. That's a good one.
Those are all decals.
Yeah.
Usually the scripts that drive the game's logic handle that, but as the developer, it's good that you know that. Yeah, marking the wall with chalk or a whiteboard with a marker. Okay, and then finally events.
The events.
Which are zones, triggers, etc. We're going to go over that on the next page, but that's the logic of your level.
Yeah.
And those are their own little pieces that either adhere to a 3D object, like an actor, a static mesh, etc., or are invisible and trigger when the player interacts with a thing. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, triggers.
Same as before.
Yeah.
Identical to 2D. Single points of interaction or triggers.
Yeah.
It could be the treasure chest you open up. It could be bumping into a monster and bringing you into the battle scene. It could be anything. If it's a single point of interaction that activates a piece of code, a blueprint, etc., 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 that's a trigger. A zone is an area of interaction. Again, in RPG Maker, that's the touch tile. Same concept.
Right.
If you enter into an area and suddenly the lights start going off and alarms sound and suddenly all the robots are now in attack mode, that's a zone. If you go into a body of water and suddenly, instead of just falling through the sky, you enter this body of water and now you're under the water and you have to swim and your oxygen bar starts slowly going, that's a zone.
That's a zone.
You program it so that physics change to emulate you being in the water and then checks to see whether or not you can breathe underwater or are drowning. Those are all zones. So the biggest two differences, triggers a single point, a zone is an area.
That's very succinct, yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, an event is this logic that runs upon the interaction. So you go up to a treasure chest, you hit the trigger for it, the event is whatever code operates. That opens up the treasure chest, sparkles, gives you the item, has you hold the item above your head, puts in your inventory, etc.
Yeah.
So these are all good, important things to know. It operates, in theory, identically to 2D. It's just now there's more steps because you got to worry about the different pieces, parts that make it seem alive and not just changing a sprite.
Yeah.
Okay, polishing your level with aesthetics. Kind of gone over this already, but particle effects add dazzle and realism. You can also hide things with particle effects.
Yes, you can.
You know, you could You could have it be so that when the wizard character swishes their hand, you could have the crystal ball just appear. It just pops right into his hand. But a particle system of sparkle will make it look like he magicked it into existence.
That's right.
The same thing can be done with
fog.
Yeah, exactly.
Fog, mist along the ground.
Yes, yes. So use your particle effects to both hide your errors, and add life to your world. Ambient proximity sounds add life. Again,
oh, can't stress that enough.
Go through your level and list everything that's in it. If it can make a sound, consider adding that to your level.
Right.
And then objects in the game world should mimic objects in the real world. So a tree should act like a tree. Trees sway in the breeze. Wood creaks when you step on it. Metal creaks when it's rusty. Think about those things. Don't just design your 3D level to be a 3D level.
Right.
Design it to be a living level.
Right.
And then we polish it up with the final pieces. Again, we cannot overstate lighting.
Lighting is so important.
So important. Go to Udemy and get a lighting course. Trust me, you will never forget it.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you work in, lighting is, heck, even if you're working in film, lighting is important. It's paramount.
It is.
And Foley, yes.
And Foley.
Yes, well, Foley is true, because you can Foley your own sounds. We didn't really talk about that, but Burke brings up a good point. When you're collecting the sounds for your level, consider making them yourself.
Yeah.
You can do a lot with a piece of wood and a slipper.
Yeah.
And something that's kind of wet like a sponge. You can do a lot, you know.
2 coconut shells.
This one right here. But it's true, though.
Yeah.
Since your player will never know what it is you use to make that sound, you can use whatever you want. As MC says, get creative.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely.
I have, in many of the things that I've worked on, seen some insane stuff that ended up making great sounds.
Yeah.
So, groceries create interesting sounds. Yeah, crumpling a bag.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Watch your shadows and reflections. Shadows need to be just deep enough to create depth and just dark enough to create contrast.
Right.
But you don't want them so much that they hide everything unless you're literally trying to say this light is casting a shadow which is obscuring your vision. So you got to look at that and look at reflections.
Look at reflection.
Light reflects differently off of different surfaces. It diffuses off of things like wood and stone. It's a lot more stark off of water or glass, and a mirror literally reflects light. So keep that in mind. I like what Zimsy just said. Look up behind the scenes on movies or radio plays.
Yes.
Yes.
Especially those radio plays.
Yes.
Those sound engineers got very creative.
The old Shadow plays and Annie. Yes.
And Annie, yes. Little Orphan Annie radio play.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and small details like footprints, smoke, swaying branches, etc. Again, this is just going over what we've already talked about. Never overestimate the tiny little things. They add so much to your life. And
then BGM.
BGM, yeah. As we said earlier, BGM. If you can do it, make it. Yeah, your voice can help make sound effects.
Absolutely. The human voice can make all kinds of different sound effects.
I think you guys have got a pretty good grasp on it. And
I think they do.
I really can appreciate it because when people get into designing a level in anything, but 3D especially, they think that the dazzly pretty graphics of the 3D automatically allow them to, gives them a free pass on all the extra work, and it doesn't.
It does not.
It does not. You don't get a free pass. So that's the end of the presentation. If anyone has any initial questions now, we'll answer them. Take about a minute or two for me to wet my whistle. And then we'll BRB and come back with an actual level that I've designed in 3D. There won't be any oral parts to it other than some rain because I don't want to distract from the lecture. But I'll explain to you where the oral triggers would be for the sound.
Correct. Where we would place them in the level for them to be heard by the player.
Also, this thing has this level has not been rendered on production value because that takes way too long.
It's true.
So it'll still look good, but you can make Unreal look really good.
Of course.
And I also turned off the God rays because it raised the CPU too high. So there won't be any pretty god.
Our poor little CPU.
So, well, this is a strong computer, but Unreal's a beast.
Yeah, Unreal is an indeed beast.
Especially when it's not rendered and it's trying to render on the fly. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we move on to the practical workshop part?
Yeah.
Where I show you guys the pretty stuff. What is the best way to set a 3D character design? Assuming you're talking about creating something in a 3D program, I would use something that allows you to model from scratch. Wow, tons of peeps.
Thank you for the gift sub. Graceless. Awesome.
5 of them. Giving the love to RPG Emma, Berkelios, Rack. Hey, Rack. Chaos, Carvel.
Uh-huh.
We'll let that
so
play for
awesome.
a minute. That's awesome. Graceless, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, that means, guys, if you're on our Discord, you actually get premium access to our content.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, so if you're not, log on to our Discord. And you guys will get our content 48 hours before the general public does.
That's right.
So.
And you participate in our round table
And you get
that we have on Tuesdays.
if you're a high enough tier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, you get to vote on
Oh, yes,
on our
the
stuff.
voting. Woohoo!
Which is really important because Teal's going to be picking her next game at the start of next year.
Yes, I will be.
And you guys are going to vote on which of her picks is the one she actually plays. So,
Yeah.
Graceless did you a massive favor.
Yeah. Thank you, Graceless.
All right. So, we're going to go ahead. Let me answer Chaos's and then we'll go
Yeah.
to our BRB. Use a program that allows you to sculpt. Don't use a program that lets you create your 3D characters from pieces, parts like a head here, a torso here. Like Poser, I wouldn't use Poser to create a 3D character.
No.
I'd use them to make a proof of concept, but then go into a program that lets you sculpt and actually sculpt the character. All right, we're going to go to BRB, and when we come back, I'm going to show you guys a level that our supporters voted on.
Yeah.
In Unreal. So be right back.
Be right back.
All right, and we're back. So what you guys voted for was the balloon crash site from Rosenhardt, which is the game we're developing. Now, of course, this is a proof of concept of the level itself,
Right.
and it's
So we have lots of placeholders.
lots of placeholders. It's going to be rough because this is not the actual level we're going to have in the game, but this is what I've been working on to show you guys how you can design your levels. Now,
Right.
when we are showing you this, you're going to see little red circles. Little red spheres. Those are our waypoints along their critical path. Let me go ahead and get the keyboard here set up.
There you go. Yeah,
There
move
we
that
go.
keyboard. There
Got
you
it.
go.
Okay.
Okay.
So the player will actually start laying face down. The character of Victoria will be laying face down after the opening animation.
Right.
And the player will have control of the character and will be given the command to crawl forward. The player will not be able to move. I'll be constraining movement so that the player will not be able to move left or right, and will actually crawl over to here on the ground. If you look right there on the ground, just below the sphere, you see a small, looks like a little watch. In the Rosenhardt, we use something called a chronometer in our battle engine to kind of keep track of player whose turn it is in combat.
Right.
So Victoria grabs the watch, which is the chronometer, and that triggers the rest of the scene. So that is our first waypoint. What I'm going to do is show you guys the level in play, and then I'll show you in the engine the little tips and tricks I've used. But as you can see, we are currently have rain coming down, which is a particle effect, and you can also see to the left and the right water effects. That is the flat water table that works within the landscape. Looking beyond the player, you actually see how off in the distance the trees eventually fade out. That is because of a fog effect that I put over the entire level that fades out in the background. There are trees beyond there, but not so many that the fog doesn't cut them out. So I have like maybe about 2 or 3 layers of trees back there, but the player will never see them because the fog fades.
Right.
The water, of course, is a shader, and you can see the clover and the various bushes and trees swing in the wind. That comes with packages, but these are all animations that are part of those particular meshes. So you can kind of see how at this point we've created a feeling of loneliness. what has happened. All the player will know is that the character was on a balloon, lightning struck, and then this.
Right.
This feeling of isolation. That's what we're going for. The character will get up and the player will have movement and the ability to move. Now, you notice I can't actually go any further. I've put invisible walls here that set the precedent that the character, the player, cannot go into the water. So right away the player knows water is a no-go.
Right.
So now when the player swings their character around, you'll start seeing things like down trees that I've created. These are just meshes that I've moved to show a path where the balloon fell, and then shows more of the forest. You also can see right here a bridge that the player won't be able to go to and cross, because right there you see another dot. That's the next waypoint where the character of Naomi, which is this character's sister, is kind of laying all limp on a rock.
Right.
So what will happen here is we would actually have a trigger, a zone, where when the player moves forward, the camera would then rush forward to where the red sphere is, draw attention to the fact that this other character is lumped over a rock, and then, you know, have the character you're controlling go, sister, and I need to go check on her. Then if you try to go here, I'm not going to go until I see if Naomi's okay. So we're pushing the player along a critical path in the opening stages of the game. Again, things like the roots in here, you see these roots in this clover, this is all landscape material. This is stuff that we've painted onto the landscape, and as you see when we approach the water line, if you can see, that kind of disappears and has a more of a wet look. So the change here between the clover to the sort of mud is all painted onto the landscape. This is all landscape painting that we've done. Same thing with these shrubs right here are all called, this is what the Unreal Engine calls foliage, but these are all instances of the same 5 shrubs. And I've kind of dropped them on, so these take up very little rendering time. Very little rendering time. While this rock right here is an actual mesh. And you can tell the difference between, you can walk through an instance, you can't walk through a mesh. So this mesh right here is actually there to kind of stop. And then this area here, I can't really go past.
Right.
There's an invisible wall here, but as you see, I've set a down tree and some bushes. So as far as the player goes, this is stopping me, not an invisible wall. There is an invisible wall right here. So moving on forward, we'll get to the next waypoint as a shrubbery, where Naomi is, and there'll be a scene between the two. But I want to draw your attention over here. This is a tree that is exactly the same as the trees that are in the background. Only this is an actual mesh that I've placed. You can see because it's actually physically there. It's not just an invisible wall. Mm-hmm. And all I've done is just rotate it down and put the roots somewhere around some rocks. And as far as you can tell, it's just a natural look of a tree that has fallen over.
Right.
And it extends all the way over here. And what you don't see is that this tree actually clips some trees back there. But when I was testing the level, I saw that the foliage of the downed tree is so thick, along with the foliage of those trees, that you can't tell. There is no way, unless you are able to leave the character and zoom up into there, you can't tell that those trees clip. It all looks like it's all kind of caught.
Yeah, it does.
And that's using just a visual trick of distance and complexity of the branches to fool the player.
So then we go over to the trigger for Naomi.
Right. So at this point, Naomi would get up. The 2 girls would have a scene. This is an actual rock. The characters don't jump, but the placeholder does. And after they have a little scene, Naomi joins the party. And the critical path actually would tell them to turn around and go towards the balloon site, the actual crash site itself. But if you move over here, there's an optional path, and here's a treasure chest. And you can have your first treasure.
That's right.
So the thing is come back here, you can kind of see it when you're approaching. Kind of see it. Kind of. See how it's just kind of there? But a little exploration goes a long way. So this is an optional path right here.
Yeah.
Chaos says, how many balloons? No, it's a hot air balloon. One
hot air balloon.
A big one, which you'll see in a second. So now that we have Naomi, we're going to zoom around and we're actually going to show you the crash site, which is over there in the distance. That is the crash site. So now that we have Naomi, remember we can't go in the wall. Now that we have Naomi, we actually can cross over this little bridge. There goes, go hop, hop, hop. And here's the actual crash site. And you can see the flames. These are all particle systems. Now let's go ahead and explore that. But before we do, treasure chest over here.
Another optional path.
Right, that gives you a treasure chest. Okay, so let's take a look-see at this. There's a lot going on here. First off, we have something burning in the background there. Spoilers. That is 2 particle systems put together on either side of that pipe. It creates the look that the whole thing is actually on fire. Thank you, Chaos. That is several parts of the particle system, by the way. The main yellow flame is a particle system. The red smoke is I'm sorry, let me start over. This is all one particle system with several emitters. The first emitter is the yellow flame. The second is the red smoke flame. And the third is the black flame that comes up and makes the black smoke that comes up and makes the actual smoke. So these are like 3, there might even be some more. And they have lights added in. Particle systems don't make lights. But if you add lights into the particle system, they can light up just fine. As you can see, it lights up the inside of the metal. And we added in a post-processing effect that makes the fire kind of warp the metal. See how it's kind of warping it as it goes up? To create that heat effect. So it looks like this metal is literally on fire.
Right.
We got another treasure chest here. Then we have the basket that's upside down, and a bunch of things are spilled out. We have sandbags here, sandbags here. We have this case that's kind of half fallen out. We have this box that's popped open, and you see a painting. Looks like a hook. If you look inside, there's actually some items in there. So this is Unreal. This is not Unity. Chaos. And the mannequin you're looking at right there, that comes with the Unreal. That is the Unreal mannequin. Over here we have letters that have spilt out all over the place. And we have a little clock right here.
There's a clock, right?
A candlestick. Basically just junk and effects.
Yeah.
Pieces, parts of just things that have just fallen out as the balloon crashed. And if you look in the distance here, it might be hard to see on the screen, but if you look just beyond the mannequin's head, it's something that looks like a red and white stripe thing. That's the actual balloon, and it has more fire on it because the balloon itself is burning.
Yeah.
You can look at it right there.
Yeah, now you can see it. Yeah, you can see the balloon now.
And the top of it's on fire. Can you open? No, we can't actually open. I didn't put any logic in here. This is just but this is openable. This would be openable in an actual finished level. Anyway, this right here waypoint is where the third character, Phileas Fogg, is unconscious, and the characters wake him up. They have another cutscene, a conversation, and then they, look around, see if there's anything they can salvage. That's a hint to start looking for treasure chests.
Yeah. And
then they look in that direction, where there's another dot you can kind of see off in the distance. Let's go that way and see if we can get to shelter.
Okay. Yeah.
So, so the player has pretty much at this point examined everything they can examine. Yeah, you can see the jets off in the back.
Yeah, see the jets.
The little jets.
Little jets, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually kind of proud of that one. But, okay, so this place is done. We're out of here. Let's get the heck out of here. Okay, boom. So they're going to go down this way, and they're going to follow this critical path right here. See another down tree? Down tree does much of the same. So this is where the path continues. This is where they would go. And you're going to see a lot of wilderness area, because this is an untamed wilderness, but there's still a path. There's still a path. So we got trees, rocks, boulders. That instance just popped in because this is an unrendered level.
Right.
So watch, you saw that. Let me do if I can do it again. Nope. Okay, so yeah, trees are going to pop in and out because the level has not been rendered, but if this was fully rendered into memory, the instances would not pop in and out. But this is a path. They can't go here. There's too much stuff here. It kind of gets stopped. And there's an invisible wall, by the way.
Right.
And they would continue going. So these are all paths.
Yeah, at the balloon chaos, where at the spot where you encounter Phileas,
Right.
That's going to be a checkpoint.
Right. All of these are technically checkpoints, except for that. That's more of a, hey, come here.
Yeah.
So Steel knows what he's doing when he's talking to you guys. But pretty much, and here's more treasure chests.
Another treasure chest along the path.
But as you can see, this is a path. Even though this is open and resembles a wilderness, it is still a path. The player cannot go through these areas, and I've marked them off with boulders and trees.
Yeah.
So then when the player gets to about here, this triggers another volume. This is a volume trigger. And a volume, not a trigger. When the player hits here, the game takes over, and they would run forward in that direction, and the scene would fade, and then it would come up on the next map.
The next map.
So we don't actually ever show the end of the map. This forest continues a great length. But this would be where the player's interaction would stop, and that you would see this mannequin would run off in the distance, the scene would fade, maybe even have the camera lift up so you can see part of the forest, maybe even have the word Black Forest appear.
Right, something like that, yeah.
And then it would come up and they would be in the next map, and it would be a different set of checkpoints and destinations as they move along the dungeon.
Right.
So now I'm going to show you guys behind the scene. Let me go ahead and exit out of here and show you guys in Unreal some of the things that I have done. So these purple things are our blocking volumes. These are what are keeping the player from going off the path. But as you can see, they kind of parallel. This is right here on the path. They kind of parallel to the trees. So it's kind of hard to see them, but these little purple lines right here are the blocking volumes. They stop the player.
Yep.
But I've created trees, rocks, etc. along the path that make it look like it's natural and not just, well, Steel being lazy.
Right.
And then the other part that I wanted to show you guys was the behind the scenes area over here, where you have these rocks and these trees. If you come behind here, you kind of see the magic vanish a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just this empty ass volume I made. This little empty ass area here. The roots are here, the roots are here, but you would never see this. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go ahead and Unreal don't like that. Let me go ahead and move over here. Restart it or whatever. That's Unreal be like, why are you clicking on me like that? There we go. Safer. So anyway, that's that.
Well, there doesn't have to be a stated in-game reason why there's treasure chests in the forest. Remember, this is a fantasy.
It's a
yes. It is set in a steampunk Victorian times, but this is a fantasy game, and so in fantasy games, you know that players expect to have treasure chests.
Right.
So we don't necessarily have to have a stated in-game reason why there are treasure chests in the Black Forest. Right.
However, you could just as easily put sparkles on the ground. Dragon Quest XI does that with mats.
Yeah, they do.
And have that be what it is. However, the consistency is key. If we decide to use sparkles on the ground for the items that the girls find, then we want to be as consistent as possible and only use containers when it absolutely works in real space.
Yeah.
If we use treasure chests, like is a staple in JRPGs, that's fine too. But again, Teal and I need to be consistent. Consistency is key.
Yes, it is.
One of the reasons why the Elder Scrolls works the way it works is because very early on, anything you examine might hold loot.
Yeah.
Cabinets, barrels, sacks.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to do that, that'd be fine, but we'd have to be, again, consistent.
Right.
And yes, Burke brings up a point. You could technically have had the treasure chest spell out during the landing. So that also works. Hey, let's look around for some of our effects. In fact, in the RPG Maker MV version of this game, that is exactly what the stuff is on the crash site that they find. The bandages, the med kits, the leeches, all of that. They actually packed that in the balloon before it crashed. So all of that is acceptable. But as the developer, the designer, you have to decide what does and does not fit the paradigm of your game.
Right.
And one more time for those in the back, be consistent. Any last minute questions? Because because this is its own monster.
Yeah.
Level design is.
And let me just reiterate that if you want real digging into technical, how do I do this in Unreal, or how do I do this in Unity? Check out online courses. We do recommend Udemy, but there are other organizations that have just as good online courses.
Absolutely. Udemy is the big one for us because it's where we went to learn stuff we need to learn.
But there are others. Just check it out.
Yeah.
There, and as you're taking the course, as you're going through it, have your engine open and practice and just do what the teacher is saying to do.
Your first,
actually do it.
Your first couple of maps are gonna be terrible. Don't worry about that.
Oh god, yeah. Don't worry about that.
When you start designing in 3D, especially if you've been designing in 2D for most of your life, it's gonna look crap. But that's okay.
You're experimenting with how the engine does things.
Yeah.
How does it do elevation and depths? How does it create and add textures?
Yeah.
That's what you're learning.
And Chaos mentions the communities, and it is true that a lot of these communities are really good. But 3D development communities, like 2D development or any development communities, are not created equally. Some are really good, some not so much. So you can always learn from someone who's willing to teach you for a few bucks.
Right.
So, hey, Video, welcome to the stream. Good to see you. We're getting near the end, but it's always good to see people. Udemy's been my main source for everything. Same here.
Yeah, we do Udemy.
When we made the leap from RPG Maker to Unreal, Teal's like, oh god, I haven't worked in Unreal forever. So we just bought a whole bunch of Unreal 4 courses.
Yeah.
And
boy, am I glad I did too, because boy, there's a lot of stuff that's changed between 2 and 4.
Yeah,
wow.
2, 3, and 4. Oh my god, life is different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's officially winter now. That's right.
Yes,
Video.
it is.
It's winter.
Happy winter solstice, everyone.
No! The Great Conjunction has occurred today.
Yes, that big, what they call him, the Christmas star.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's so darn bright.
Anyway,
any last minute questions about 3D level design? One more state for anyone out there, and please spread the word. Next Monday, our final creator classroom of the year will be on the game design document.
Yeah.
We highly recommend, if you're a game developer, to reach it, because it's very important to learn that organization of your game Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're very welcome, Emma. It's always a pleasure to have every single person here.
Yes, it is.
While Unreal is our engine of choice, you could take this and apply it to any 3D engine out there. And we urge you to actually, all of you, to play in as many 3D engines as you can.
Yeah, because you'll find one that you really like.
Yes.
And you'll stick with that one.
Of the year, that's right. Yeah, that'll be it.
Yeah.
It'll be the color design. Green. Green's the color palette.
Yeah. We would use greens, and we would have a complementary palette. So you'd have greens, yellows, and blues. Yeah, blue being the storm effect. Like I said, there's actually supposed to be God rays. Those are the light rays, but they were killing the CPU while I had Streamlabs open, so I turned them off. We just turned them off. Yeah. But we center everything around the color green. Yeah. And as you can see, there are complementary colors of blue, and you see yellow, and you see brown. Right. And brown, of course, is a variation of yellow-orange. Yes. Now, as far as what we're going to do education-wise in the new year hits, we always mix things up a bit. So don't expect identical formats video. Just this is how we want to wrap up 2020. Yeah, this is how we're wrapping it up. Good creator classroom on the GDD. Yeah. And then we'll kind of go from there as to what we'll continue to do to educate you guys, because that's what Studio Blue is all about. That's right. All right. Any last minute questions? Yeah. Well, right. Yes. You're right. Video Wizard. Absolutely. Originally, we were gonna hey, we can skip, but then we wouldn't be able to hit 2020's ending properly. So we were like, no, we'll just do one. We'll just do one. Yeah. If Degica, we've been having problems getting into YouTube, so if we stream for Degica next week, it'll be after that stream. Exactly. Otherwise, it'll be at 9:30 as usual. So, I think we're done, Teal. I think we're finished, yeah. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed giveaway. We'll think about it, Chaos. Last minute croissants. Yum. Give me some, Burke.
So, to reiterate,
Yep.
next week will be the game design document creator classroom, which is how we're going to wrap things up. But I also want to state something really important to each and every one of you out there. We are finishing up Dragon Quest XI.
Yes!
And it's going to happen this Wednesday.
That's right.
Be there. Tell everybody Kalismos dies.
That's right. We're getting them.
So if you like what you saw, leave a smack down like below, subscribe to our channel, consider supporting us on Patreon, connect us on our Facebook, Twitter, Discord. We'll see you in the next video.
See you next time.